Healthcare and senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential.
Welcome, Laurie Miller. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Joe.
So glad y'all are here. We have a great show today. We are talking about the solo ager. And I don't know if you all knew that 28% of seniors, older adults live alone at home. And there are some complications with that. There's some risks with that. And so we're talking about the solo ager. That is someone living alone or someone that doesn't have any children. Maybe they've never married or their spouse has passed away. Some maybe they only have a living relative that's a nephew that lives states away.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about how can these seniors live safely. We can honor their wishes of aging in place, just safely, economically, and what's out there to keep them at home safe. So just to know the statistics, there are 22 million solo agers in the United States. 28% of older Americans live alone. That's a big percentage. And, I've had some difficult clients as a care manager. One in particular came on a hospice referred. This gentleman had lost his wife about 5 years ago. So like a year before COVID. Then he was isolated at home, lived at home, didn't really make friends, didn't really get out. And he was kind of a loner. It was just he and his wife for many years. So he wound up going to the ER with stomach pain, wound up with pancreatic cancer that had metastasized all over his body and could no longer take care of himself. He didn't have a power of attorney. He did not have advanced directives in place. He didn't have a will in place. We didn't even know what his wishes were. So the hospice reached out to me. We stepped in about 3 weeks before he passed. And by working very hard, were able to get his wishes made. He was able to pass and leave everything to the SPCA. He loved animals. But we went through hurdles that could have been avoided, expensive hurdles, to get what his wishes.
Yeah, and thankfully you guys were involved. Otherwise, those wishes would have never been fulfilled.
That's right. So, it's just so important to pre-plan. So, Laurie, I know I have known you for a long time, almost 20 years in the senior industry. We both started our home care agencies about the same time. And I sold, of course. But anyway, you do a great job. You have a great reputation in Dallas. So you are the founder. Laurie is the founder of Apple Care Companions. And she understands the complexities of caregiving firsthand. After navigating your own mother's illness in 2007, you have leveraged the experience to help families through the process. You are a champion for caregiver resources, founding AgeTechNow.com. It's an age tech database and the Conversation Ready North Texas initiative. So it's to open up conversations about end-of-life issues. So we are so honored to have you here today. And we're just going to talk about the solo ager and tell me how you handle. Have you had any clients that are solo that you've worked with over the years? And I know you have.
I have. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. So it's really important to have these discussions and talk about it. And I know for us, we have to have an emergency contact. So that's the first kind of an easy step, is to ask, who is your emergency contact? And then once we get that, we can kind of figure out and learn, have they shared their wishes with that emergency contact? Is the emergency contact really a power of attorney, or is it just an emergency contact? Like if there was a problem, that's who we call. And so we do start the conversation that way. But I think it's really interesting, whether you're solo ager or not, because I think this is one thing that crosses all lines, is people don't want to talk about how they want to live at the end of their life. And I think one thing to do is to reframe that conversation. It's not how do you want to die, and it's not end of life kind of things. It's how do you want to live at the end of your life. So your story about that man, it would have been very nice to know whether his doctor knew. He could have had a conversation with the doctor, probably should have had a conversation with the hospice, someone on the hospice team. If I can share a really quick story of why I got involved with it, is my mother. She was a hospice volunteer. She worked with older adults for her career. She was a social worker, never hesitated talking about death and dying. We would go to funerals together and she would kind of elbow me. I want that at my funeral. I don't want that at my funeral. So I kind of thought we knew what was going on. She had all her advance directives. Everything was great. Well, she had complications of lung cancer and she ended up being in the hospital, emergency, via the emergency room, the worst possible things. And my brothers and I realized we had no idea how she wanted to live at the end of her life before she died. And it was really a struggle. And we thought we knew everything because we had talked about after she died. And it's really the conversation before you die of how do you want to live. And no one knows how they're going to die, right? We don't know, but we can know general things. I want to be at home. I want to be with nature. I want to live as long as you still recognize me or I recognize you. And I think those are some big topics that we can talk about and share. I've also learned a lot of people are superstitious and they think if they talk about death or dying that they'll make it happen, which is really a sad situation.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you see a lot in home health, Brian?
We see a lot. Yeah. I'd say a good chunk of our caseload is the solo ager. So they can it takes a bunch of different forms. Sometimes they're in independent living communities where they're kind of in an apartment, but there's at least a community around them, which I like because then there's, they have friends and they have people who check on them. And then we have other ones that are in their own homes, and some of them have kids that are local that, they swing by a few times a day, a few times a week, maybe a few times a month, just to kind of check on mom or dad. They'll make phone calls, whatever. And then we have other ones, and you and I have worked on a couple of these where there's a nephew, 2,000 miles away in Maine, who's trying to navigate all this stuff, has no idea that uncle was just in the hospital until we call and go, hey, guess what? And so trying to navigate that kind of stuff can be tricky, especially if they're like let's say removed family, but not everyday immediate family, right? If they're a nephew or a second cousin or something, they may not know what those wishes truly are. And so we get some interesting dynamics just because of that relationship too.
Well, and we have this new client and he's alone. And as I said, we have to have an emergency contact. Mm-hmm. And so I pressed him with it and he said, it's his neighbor. And I said, so you want us to have your neighbor as your emergency contact? And he said, absolutely. And I suggested that he get an emergency response button. And he said he won't get one. He won't wear it because he doesn't want 911 to be called and the door busted down. Meanwhile, 3 days before, 3 days before I met him, he had fallen and it took him an hour or 2 hours, it was a really long time in the middle of the night to crawl to his phone to call his neighbor because the neighbor has a key. And I said, there are things out there where it doesn't have to go to 911. It could go to either a call center and the call center can call your neighbor.
That's right.
But he's so private.
Or Alexa, call my neighbor. I'm on the floor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting, but I had to figure out why it was. And he didn't want his door busted down.
It's amazing if you keep asking the question, why? Eventually you get to like the real story, and then we can actually have a real conversation about, okay, what the real obstacle is and how do we overcome that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot we're just thinking about some of the obstacles. Like, I think a lot is pride. A lot of these men just don't want to ask for help. A lot of our old, military guys, they want to be independent. They're used to doing things, take charge and handling things. And this is something they're just not prepared for.
Exactly.
And, they don't know what to do. So it's easy just to, Well,
and one other thing, I was doing kind of a roundtable session about the Conversation Project and talk about end of life things. And it was an older crowd. So we're already talking about people in their 80s. And I asked a question and we were going to go around the table, and this gentleman to my right looked like a deer in headlights, and he was 80 something. And I said, well, should we start this way? And he said, sure. So we started that way. And by the time we got back to him, he could answer the question. And he said, I have to be honest with you. I've never considered my mortality. and he was in his 80s. And I think sometimes it's just asking that question. And I think it was good for him just to think about it. He had never thought about it.
Wow. Well, you know, my father-in-law passed away in the ER. It was terrible. He died. He did not have his DNR. And they, did chest compressions, broke his ribs. It was horrible. And he had a daughter-in-law. He had 2 daughter-in-laws actually that are RNs. And, he would not have, he was stoic and would not have that conversation. And I just think he could have died so much more peacefully. It was just that pride that got in the way. What about for those people that are isolated? And I know with COVID, so many of our seniors got used to just being alone and just playing on their computer. And that's kind of weird, the way they live their life. It's so sad. So how can we help those that don't have the information, that live isolated? How can we get the word out to them on what to do?
I mean, it depends on, are they on social media? Because there are a lot of private Facebook groups. A lot of people are not on social media or don't want to share that way. But sometimes those are good because they are a little more anonymous and people could share their feelings. I mean, ideally, it has to be up to them, that they might have to ask a doctor or clergy or something, even senior centers, if they're getting out at all. Ideally, someone is seeing them, whether they're getting meal delivery or something, hopefully, that people aren't so isolated like they were. But there's a lot of tools. I mean, there's tools if there's any family at all. And I guess something else to think about, it doesn't have to be family. It could be a very good friend. It could be
church members,
which is, there's a lot of solo agers, and it's important to have somebody, ideally younger than you, who maybe isn't going through aging concerns, but yeah, really important.
So I know you are a strong advocate of the Conversation Project, and now you are doing something with Conversation North Texas.
Conversation Ready North Texas.
So tell us about that.
It's based on the Conversation Project, just making it a little more local and a little more manageable. And one of the main things, and this we're talking about now, and is you want to get the care you want, but you don't want to get care that you don't need or you don't want. And I think it's really important to specify that and talk to your doctor and talk to clergy. Like I said, anyone who's going to meet you at the ER or whoever you're going to call your emergency contact, or if you need a power of attorney for everything these days. And if you really are alone, you may have to pay for someone to be care manager, right? I mean, pay to have someone who's going to manage your money and manage your health if you cannot do so for yourself. So Conversation Ready North Texas is just, I invite everyone to go to it and look at it, but it's just a way to help get that conversation started. We have free tools on there, the Conversation Starter Kit, which is a great booklet that you can read and answer some questions, just like the gentleman who never thought about it. There's some sliding scales. So maybe you don't know the answer, but you can kind of write it down, and you can always send this booklet to your friends or your loved ones, or whoever would be honoring your wishes.
And one thing I know, if somebody is concerned about cost, visiting physicians, there are a lot of visiting physicians groups here and all over the country. And they do, if there's a social worker needed, they can provide that. And I love that about the visiting physicians. It's paid for by Medicare, and they go out about every 4 to 6 weeks, do labs, check in. If there's a fall or something, you can call that visiting physician and they can come out. I'm a big advocate of that.
One other thing, there's actually a Medicare billing code to have the conversation with your doctor.
Wow.
So yeah.
I did not know that one.
Yep. It's not a huge reimbursement, but it's at least something. So that is an incentive for them to have the conversation.
Do you know what that code runs?
No.
Okay. That's okay.
That is part of that remote patient monitoring that we're going to talk about too. So there is a program. Doctors are the ones that oversee this, but it's getting durable equipment out, blood pressure cuff, scale, glucometer, pulse ox. And so patients, the solo patient can go and say they've got congestive heart failure and they need a daily weight, or say they have brittle diabetes and they need to give their blood sugar, their number to the doctor. So the doctors get an idea of what's going on, making sure they're stable. If they see some unstable values, they will reach out, say, come on in. But those are great programs that are provided by Medicare. It's not costly, but it's getting that equipment in place.
Yeah.
And then that is an extra just security for the patient.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's just watching for things before they brew, or as they're brewing before they turn south. So I'm familiar with it in a post-acute or home health context, and I'm not a big fan of it when it's done through the home health, because the way that home health reimbursement is set up, it's supposed to be short-term. So, whatever, 3, 4, or 5 months, 2 months, whatever. And so typically when a home health has been doing this in the past, and even here recently, because I've checked into it, they say that the average time that a patient has the RPM machinery in their home is roughly 40 days.
while they're on home health.
Yeah, because the big push is to reduce 30-day hospital readmissions. So once we get past that, then we just take it back out of your house, because there's no reimbursement. There's no extra reimbursement for home health to do it. And so my challenge has always been with that is it seems like it's a temporary fix. It's a Band-Aid when it's done through that context. Because if I train you for the next 40 days on how to take care of it and monitor it through this system, and then I take it out, 7 weeks later or 6 weeks later, now I got to retrain you on something else that you can maintain. So I like that physicians now are starting to do this on their own, because there is reimbursement for them, and then the machinery
Stable.
gets to stay out there for far longer.
Yeah, and the
That's
reimbursement
wonderful.
is between $200 and $300 a month.
Yeah.
And so it really is great protection for that patient.
There's a new one. I just met with a practice a few weeks ago, and they are starting to. I like the vital sign monitoring, but I think it doesn't go far enough typically. And so we can have a whole other conversation on the functional capacity stuff and strength. But there's a lot of data on grip strength and some other things, 6-minute walk test or, sit to stand test or whatever. And so there's a group that is working on functional measures within those. They're kind of looking at that as like a fourth and a fifth vital sign, which I think is fantastic, because a lot of times you might not see it necessarily reflected in the vital signs, in the heart rate or in the blood pressure or in the blood sugars, but there's other things that are brewing internally that start to manifest itself in more of a strength or functional decline. And so having those kind of additional measures on there is a really interesting way to kind of be the canary in the coal mine, like spot the stuff before it really turns south.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get some early interventions and hopefully resolve it before it results in some sort of catastrophe, a hospitalization or fall or an injury or something.
Mm-hmm. That's where, like, say somebody has dizzy spells. You don't just have dizzy spells. Something is causing that. And so that's why, having the remote or having a visiting physician or having a care manager. So for me, there are not a whole lot of RNs that are care managers. Most are social workers. But the benefit to us is we are nurses, and we'll check vitals, and we do an assessment, and we can kind of look for things that we might have some concerns about. So, Laurie, tell me too, I know you are so big on tech. That is my weakness, is technology. So I'm grateful that you do this. So tell me some of the technology that you could recommend for aging seniors, solo agers in their homes to keep them safe.
And again, there's no one size fits all. So it kind of depends on what they're looking for. But there's a lot of communication systems or easy video calls. I'll tell you, there's a great new product that it's called Jubilee TV, and you hook it to the TV set, and you have a remote, and you have an app on your phone, and you can control that TV from anywhere in the world. So like a lot of people I know get the call from an older adult, can you come over and change the channel?
Can you get the remote?
Oh, yeah.
I can't get my remote.
Can I tell you how many televisions I have set up and Apple TVs in settings to go through because they clicked a button wrong?
Exactly.
I know how to use every single TV known to man to fix those issues now. Yeah.
So your app mirrors and you can see what they're watching, and then you can change the
that's
channel. You can even
interesting.
set it so, like, if they wanted to watch the football game on Sunday at 3:30, it could just automatically go off, turn on it.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
But that's the cool thing it does
Yeah.
for the TV. But it also, from your app, you can just call and video chat with them while they're sitting in front of their TV.
See, I love that.
That is really
Yes, and I have a client right now. Her husband passed away and she cannot figure out the remotes. I mean, honestly, we have 3 remotes to our TV in our bedroom, and I have no idea why we need 3.
Right.
And it drives me crazy. And Matt, my husband, has to come in and fix it because
you push the wrong button.
if my son has played a video game, then it's
The different
totally
stores,
screwed up.
right?
No.
Well,
but
so
it's
but this is
great.
really helpful for that. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be an adult child who's monitoring it, just someone who's monitoring it. And it's nice, depending on where the TV is and how it's set up, you could see the room.
Yep.
So it's kind of nice to have a glimpse into what's going on, because I think that's a lot of issues for some solo agers, just to make sure everything's safe. And so that's a thing that's really good on the communication level. And then there are some, not the remote that you're talking about, the remote telehealth for through the doctor, but there are some that you could do privately. I mean, that you would just buy to do if that was something that you wanted.
So what would that roughly cost if you?
I mean, it just depends on which one. It could be $30 a month. It could be if you have a scale and the pulse ox and blood pressure, it might be more, but $30 to $50 a month. It kind of just depends.
Well, we hear the commercial, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. So getting that life alert, and I know we talked about this the other day at the class that we did together at our church, but the life alert, what does that cost?
So it ranges from, I think there's some that are very low cost or free. I mean, depending on what program, up to maybe, if you're paying for one, up to $50 a month. But a lot of people won't wear them. They'll leave it, or they get them after they fall. And then what's the point? Because they'll keep them on their nightstand. But that's something else. There's a lot of motion sensors that there's no wearable. So the older adult doesn't have to wear anything. And it senses motion or inactivity, which can be a great tool. But you still need someone on the other end who's going to be monitoring it.
And who knows what to do with it.
Yeah. But that could be a care manager. It could be, a home care agency. And it could be just someone. A lot of times they really don't have to know so much, because there's so much good AI now, AI for good, not for evil.
Yeah.
That there's graphs, and it will just be, red and green. And so you can just see this is out of whack for you.
For example, if they're getting up and going to the bathroom more times today
than they did
a few days ago, there might be a UTI brewing.
Exactly.
So they may not have symptoms of it yet, except for the fact that they're urinating more often. And so stuff like that, like you can get to things early.
Right.
Yeah. Or if they start slowing down. I don't know if did they do gait speed ones yet? There's some gait speed stuff for like clinic environments. Yeah. I cannot wait. Actually, it was your son who actually talked about the gait speed stuff in his clinic. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so he said, as of now, he was not sure if they had something like that for home. But if you start to see gait speed changes, like even subtle ones, something probably is brewing.
Exactly. I mean, there was a company that was doing it about 6 years ago, but they were paralyzed by perfection, so they never continued on. But they had that technology, so I'm sure it's going to be coming out soon. But it's really great for someone like with Parkinson's, because maybe they need to change their medicine, or maybe they need to up it, or maybe because the gait speed's a huge predictor.
Yes,
huge predictor. So I would say that's going to be out soon.
Yeah,
very soon. Cool.
Another thought too is medication, because so many of my clients that when we first bring them on, they have meds, they have old meds, new meds, doubled meds. They're pill box. They don't have a pill box. They just have a huge bag. So getting their meds in order and having a care manager, a nurse, a home health nurse, call the doctor and say, can I get a nurse out through Medicare just to get my meds managed? Is that something they can do?
Typically, they'll need something a little bit more than just like what you're asking for is reconciliation of a med list. And so it's a covered skill, but it'd be like a one-off thing. So usually when we're coming out there, that's part of what we're doing is a reconciliation of the med list. Because, when I used to work in research, it was, we had a running joke that was every senior, the average senior rather, has one PCP and 2.3 specialists. and nobody's really talking.
They
like
don't talk.
Even within, I won't use names, but even within the big systems here, the healthcare systems, they're not necessarily aware of medication changes that the cardiologist did, so that the neurologist knows the next time they walk in there, oh, I got an alert on my phone that said your medication's changed. So yes, it's in the system, but I'm not so sure they're actually getting that information, at least from what I'm hearing from patients. The neurologist is surprised that there's been a cardiac med change.
I can give you one step further.
Yeah.
That I have seen where you have the different doctors. You might have a hospitalist too, because they went to the ER, changed meds. But then I'll run into, and I've talked to the doctor about this, one doctor, I'm not going to tell you what to do about that med because someone else prescribed it. And then you're like, well, I'm asking you. You're the professional and you're supposed to guide me.
They'll usually defer to the specialist on those.
But then you have to call each one, and then that one doesn't know the other one's
So sometimes it's a lengthier process for our nurses to do that. But yes, it's part of the home health thing that we do, is we do a reconciliation, especially if they've been in, the hospital system. So, you got to imagine they've got one set of medications that they were taking before whatever happened, the fall or the CHF exacerbation or whatever. Then they go to the hospital, meds are changed again. Then they go from the hospital to the rehab and the meds are changed again.
And sometimes some are missed.
Right.
And then they come home
eliminated.
and they go, Brian, I have 3 bags of meds. Which one am I taking?
I know.
Right.
I see that all the time.
Yep.
Yeah. And that can cause falls. That can cause confusion. That can cause dizziness. You don't know what they're doing and what they're taking.
I had a client once and his wife had died. So he was a solo ager. I mean, his daughter lived in town, but she really wasn't involved. He had his meds set up in a med set, except he would wake up in the middle of the night and think it was morning and take his morning meds and then go back to sleep. And then he would wake up in the morning
and take it
and
again.
take his morning meds.
Wow.
And that was, so we had to get one of those locked ones.
We've got a client that does that, and even with the lockbox,
it was a problem.
Yeah, it's hard because they do get their days and my nights mixed up. But it's hard. These are great examples. Laurie, thank you so much. Brian, any thoughts?
Yeah, I just think with the solo ager, back to even like the conversation project and those kind of things. We are used to, at least in this country, we are used to, and I think in most Western civilizations, having some sort of an insurance policy, whether it's health insurance or life insurance or car insurance or homeowners insurance or whatever. This conversation project probably needs to be seen through that lens, where this is like an insurance thing. This is to help make sure that your last moments or last 6 months, years on this planet with your loved ones or without, your wishes are being met. And if you haven't communicated that, then nobody really knows.
Right.
Yeah, and it's going to know.
And it's an early and often kind of situation, because you can change. I mean, if you're in your 40s or 50s, you're going to be different than when you're in your 80s and 90s. I have reminded
my wife of my death wishes multiple times, so she doesn't ever forget.
Good.
And every time I mention, she's like, "I know." I'm like, "Okay, just so clear." So first off, I think it's important to have the conversation because it's just viewed as like an insurance policy. And then the second thing I think about with solo agers is there's a number of different ways to keep you in your home. If that's your desire. And that can be, for me as a PT, we're usually looking at the home environmental stuff. Like, is it set up conducive for how your body's moving now and into the future? And so sometimes it means that the bar that you installed in the bathroom is actually on the wrong side. Right. And so we got to flip it over to the other side. And so sometimes it's simple things like that. Sometimes it's making sure they have the right equipment. Sometimes it's rearranging furniture. Sometimes it's getting different furniture. And so then we're kind of going through their entire life of dressing, bathing, toileting, transfers, getting to the kitchen, getting a sandwich, and figuring out what things can we introduce here, whether it's modification to how you're doing the task or modification to how the environment's set up or modification to the equipment that you're using, so that we can give you a better chance of doing this successfully, and safely. And so I think of it through that lens. But even within that, there's still other things that can happen within the home, like the technology pieces where we can get supervision, like the locking medication thing. So what I think,
the motion detector.
Yeah. So I think for the audience takeaways is, if your goal or your family member's goal is to stay in their home for a long term, that's where they want to live out their days. I appreciate that, because I want to do the same thing. Then there's a number of different things that can be implemented at the home site to help make sure that happens. And so sometimes it oftentimes means that you need one of us to kind of help guide you, because this is the first time you've been 85, in your, so, we've gotten the privilege of working with thousands and thousands of patients over the years. And so we've seen a whole bunch of different scenarios, and we have a whole bunch bunch of resources that we can connect family members and patients to. So sometimes just reaching out to someone who works in that field to help connect you with stuff, but we can absolutely make it work at the home site.
And there are classes, there are classes at churches, at the senior centers, at the senior source. There's information out there. You do just have to ask.
The only thing I would say about information is be careful that it's always generic, because it's supposed to be appropriate for the masses. So when we get in there's sometimes where there's some nuance to stuff, like for example, the bar being on the wrong side. Like they would have said, hey, get a bar for the bathroom to help you with transfers. Well, the dude had a stroke on his right side. So the bar being over here doesn't really much help him. Right. So he's making it work because he was told, I need a bar in the bathroom. So there's nuanced things, but yes, some general principles of some things can be found in some of those senior centers and some of those talks, but sometimes you might need an expert who can kind of tailor it to your needs.
And, if you're not happy with your doctor, you can change doctors. I know I've had patients say, well, I've talked to my doctor about this and he just, I don't really have time to discuss this today. And, your Medicare dollars are paying for this. So if you're not happy, there are other doctors out there that could do a great job too. That's another thing. Thank you, Laurie, so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And I hope y'all have a great day. And those solar agers, if they want to get in touch with Laurie Miller with any technology, Apple Care and Companions, how can they reach you, Laurie?
Yeah, through either website, applecareandcompanion.com, agetechnow.com. All my
Age Tech Now is AGETECH, right? Age Tech, like technology.
Technow.com.
Okay.
All of those will go to me.
Great. And Brian, if they are looking for some home health, Medicare home health.
Yeah. Nexus Home Healthcare is the name of the company. You can email me at brian@nexushomehealthcare.com, or you just go on our website. By the way, on our website, this podcast exists. Our biweekly newsletter exists, and any information that you guys need on how to connect with us is there too.
Brian, you have some great information on your website. I love it. And I've recommended that to my clients too.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Joe.